let's take a look here at the Slate Digital Virtual Mix Rack. And there it is. It's a beautiful thing, this thing. And really what it is, it's inspired by a series, a 500 series, where you could get these modular sort of EQs and compressors that were pulled out of the console, the API Lunchbox 500. And it's a small footprint. Large format consoles are hard to fit into most modern mixing and mastering setups. Most people are doing stuff from their home, from their, bedrooms, their small studios. Very few people have room money or maintenance money for an SSL or Neve. But the sound of these things is still incredible. And, when digital came out, everybody was like, wow, this stuff sounds anemic, sounds anorexic. No, it's not, it has no personality. It's cold, it's small. And so the blending of analog and digital is really the way we create a modern sound. So they give you here everything but the fader, and this is really cool because they're coming out with new modules all the time, and you can do the serial compression, serial EQ, flip the order, and they're bringing back some of the best of the vintage stuff that really, FabFilter and Isotope, we love it, but these are our clean digital tools, right? These we can see everything. But they don't generate harmonics. They usually don't have non-linearity. They don't usually have much, musicality. They tend to be clinical. And even though I know they throw some of that stuff in there, but there's nothing like a Neve EQ, right? There's nothing like an SSL EQ. There's nothing like an 1176. There's nothing like a Chandler EMI compressor. And, if you're going for a retro sound, maybe you just would only use that stuff. But to make this sort of modern HD sound that still has warmth and character and saturation, we have to get good at these tools and know what they're good for and how to use them. So that's kind of what we're looking at today. So the first one we're going to look at is the FGN Brit N EQ. And anybody who knows gear, they don't always want to say it's a Neve, because there's financial stuff involved in licensing and all that stuff. So it's inspired by a Neve. So this one is sort of a 1073, but they added some continuously variable frequencies and an extra bell curve. This has a high shelf that's fixed at 12K. And this is really for rock people and organic music people. I know this is an EDM sort of webinar, but, I think modern EDM people are mixing and matching, adding some organic elements. I think that's great. So, really in the 90s and stuff, there were two consoles, really two main consoles. There were other ones, but two big British ones. One was SSL and one was Neve. And the rock guys, rock people tended to like the Neve, and the dance hip hop people tend to like the SSL. The Neve, the thing about it is that you're going to see something that says it's discrete. And what that means is they would actually solder together capacitors and resistors and transformers. This was all sort of handmade like jewelry. This is anyone who knows how to solder. This is no joke at all. This is like a hard thing to do. And because they went component to component, it had a different sound than op amps, which are, the same thing, but they live in chips. So SSL tends to be chip based, and Neve is discrete, point to point kind of stuff. They have a different sound. And the Neve sound is a very open sound. It's very rich in harmonics. Sometimes it sounds to me like running stuff through an amp, like when you record a guitar or bass direct, and then you reamp it. You get this air and this openness, and all EQs, anyone who knows a little bit about it, EQs is they all ring a little bit. They have a little oscillation in them. And the harmonics that they generate as well, we have to get smart about. Some of them have long decays, some of them have short decays. But the Neve has this very open sound. It almost sometimes sounds like it's running through an amp to me. It has a lot of air, a lot of harmonics, and it's very musical. It's less. It's not like it's more musical in a sense than it is clean and clear, and it goes really really well with mid-range instruments like guitars, mid-rangey synths, vocals, stuff like that. Um, and so let's take a look and take a listen here. We'll go to Logic. Make sure everyone can see Logic. And now this would be the time to log onto the MixLR. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to play a little guitar loop, and please just give me a Y in the questions that you can hear it. Okay, so it sounds like everyone can hear it. Anyone who can't, make sure that you have this link, this MixLR link. And I'm going to just keep going. The link is down at the bottom. Okay, so let's take a look here. So most of the time, this virtual mix rack here will live on your insert. And, you know, with these vintage EQs, we really mostly use them for additive EQ. We mostly use them for boosting. Can you cut with them? Sure. Should you cut with them? Sure. But, you know, using FabFilter where you can see everything, you can make any shape of cut you want. Using Alloy 2 or, you know, any isotope thing where you can see stuff, you know, this is probably the easiest for doing cutting. But the boosting with something that has personality, harmonics, character, interesting shapes and curves, this is really where this shines. So, you know, at the school we have quite a systematized workflow: tape compression, reductive EQ, musical compression, additive EQ, de-essing, all that kind of thing. Like there's a defined workflow that we obviously sometimes don't always follow as literally, but there is a defined workflow. So within our workflow at the Academy, we use the vintage EQs for boosting, and they sound amazing. So here is a Neve. I know it's an EDM day, but we're going to throw in a couple organic instruments just because, hey, we all should be doing a little organic stuff as well. So here is a classic, which is a Neve EQ on acoustic guitar. So I'll start with the sound, and then I'll bypass it. You can hear the difference. And so what you can hear there is like this thing absolutely brings this thing to life. Like I say, it's almost as though it's running through a guitar amp or something. It has this incredible air in the circuitry, and it can also, you know, it has this very open sound. So that's here. So let's just make this sound together. I always like to go from bottom to top when I do my EQ. So you'll see here is a really cool high pass filter or a low cut, and 12 dB per octave is pretty standard. And even though we do our reductive EQ in FabFilter or Isotope Land, you can do a little extra here because these filters are very smooth and they have their own sound. So there is the low cut. Then we'll move up to the shelf. Now this is it's a fixed shelf. Boosting with a fixed shelf is something that we really rarely do, because what happens is even though you extend the frequencies in an even manner, you end up with a whole lot of energy in the really sub frequencies, in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, And that stuff can actually clog up your drain, clog up your system. So a shelf EQ is more useful as a reductive EQ than an additive EQ. So don't feel you're doing something wrong if you're not boosting with your shelf. Because like I said, boosting with a shelf kind of extends some extra muddy frequencies sometimes as well. So there's that. Here's the bell, and you'll notice that there's no Q. You can't actually set the Q. Most vintage EQs, the way they work, if it's just gain and frequency, if they're bells, is if you're doing a little bit of boost, it's rather wide. And as you extend the boost, it naturally narrows. And if you think about that, there's a real logic to that, because if you want to do a little boost of something, a little boost narrow is probably not going to do anything. A little boost wide will make a difference. But if you're pushing a lot of gain, you probably don't want to push it wide. You probably are going after a certain frequency. So these are kind of have that auto Q sort of factor to them. And you have two sort of overlapping EQs, which is really useful. Overlapping EQs add flexibility. On the real Neve, these were all not, fixed frequency. You'd had to choose this or this. With the Slate, you can get in between, and that's really important, I mean, sometimes it's cool to have fixed frequencies, but a lot of the time, you wish you could get just the frequency you're looking for. And then here's this magic, very famous Neve shelf. It's fixed at 12K, and it can create quite a bit of air or a hushing effect. So let's just kind of engineer this together. We'll sort of make our way a little bit. And, it just puts an incredible air on stuff. And like I said, it's not clean and personalityless. It rings. It has a harmonic to it that is super musical, especially for mid-range elements. So that is just peanut butter and jelly, champagne and caviar, Kim and Kanye, whatever you want to call it. It's just the acoustic guitar and Neve, they just go together. It's magic. All right, so that's an example of that. Now let's go to the EDM world for a second. And here's a lead that, again, is sort of a mid-rangey lead. And we'll go here. And we'll listen to first the Neve EQ on the lead. So, it's not a guitar, but it sort of is in that mid-frequency guitar-y kind of thing. And that's really where the Neve shines, because it adds all these cool supportive harmonics. So let's engineer this together. We'll go to this module here, start from scratch, and just go through a little bit of the engineering. Right. This is again, we use this for musical boost. That's really what we typically do, and it just works incredibly well for that. It gives it a bite. You can push it hard and distort it, but it has the edginess that works really well on those type of sounds. So that is the FGN. We'll just call it the Neve. I can't remember all these crazy call numbers. All right, so let's move right along, and let's stay in England. And let's look at the SSL, right? So the SSL, it was chip-based, had a more hushed sound, was not as open, has shorter harmonics. Let's go here to here. So this is a replica of the SSL 4000 series. There's the E series, there's the G series. They're all kind of similar with a few little differences. Not discrete, very smooth, very flexible. They're harmonically rich. Again, these EQs, we're using them not because they're clean. We're using them because they have personality. The harmonics on the SSL don't tend to ring out as much in the low frequencies. In the SSL, the low frequency harmonics ring out a little longer, and in the mids and the highs, they're a little tighter. The Neve has a little more extended ringing. This is a shorter ringing. It's a tighter sound. It's a cleaner sound, although it's not clean. It's not as edgy as the Neve. And this thing just works on everything. It works particularly well on low frequencies, kicks and basses. But it works for complex sounds like piano and synth because even though it generates harmonic distortion, it's a tighter harmonic distortion. So let's give this a listen here. I have it on a kick drum, on a hard kick. And let's see here. This sounds like this. Okay, I'm sorry, but that is just total magic to me. It's warm, it's tight, it can do a lot of work for you, but in a very tight sort of way. It doesn't sound old or filtered or vintagey. It just sounds warm and tight, warm and tight. So let's go ahead and engineer this a little bit together. I will bypass this one. Let's turn this one on. And you'll notice that this is much more helpful when it comes to boosting low frequencies, is if we can punch this in, it becomes a bell, right? Like I said, boosting low frequencies with a low shelf can get a little sloppy unless it's sort of like acoustic guitar and vocal or something where it's like very sparse production. But if you have a dense mix and you have to fit a lot of stuff in, and you want to make a very pointed boost, you want to be in bell mode. So the Neve cannot do that, which is another reason why I use it a lot for the mids and mid-frequency stuff, is because it's hard to boost lows in a clinical way with those. So then these are two overlapping bells, and then this one can go between shelf and bell. And again, bell being sometimes for high end, a much more focused sort of spotlight to shine on things. So let's go ahead and engineer this a bit together. So, all of a sudden that kick drum goes from like banging your grandma's old high heel shoe on a table to like a fat kick, right? Um, Amazing. The SSL, it just has just enough harmonics to make it interesting, but not so much that it's too ringy and flabby and not tight. So just nothing bit short of magic, a little SSL on your kick drum. Let's go to another low frequency moment here. And this is the SSL on a long kick. And this sounds like this. Do I have the right one? Let's see here. And there's a little bit of distortion there. I don't know if we could just pull the fader down, or maybe I'm pushing these lows a little bit hard, but I don't mind a little bit of distortion myself. So on this one here, what are we doing? We're in the bell mode. We're boosting 6 dB at 40 hertz. We're cutting a little bit, 7 dB, um, right in the 800 thing. And we did that on the kick drum too. So it's not illegal to throw in a couple cuts. And sort of if you're there and you have the extra band and you don't need to boost, you can take a little bit of sometimes mid-range out of some of the kicks. I like to cut my kicks like a dB or two between 200 and 800. I kind of depends on where the sound is, but it actually really tightens up the sound. It's a great little kick drum trick. And then here we are boosting 5 dB at 5K, and then we're in a bell shape here and just brightening up the kick too. Sometimes people think that low frequency instruments don't need brightening up, and it's really not true. In order to bring them forward in the mix, we do have to add some good brightness to them. So there you go. The SSL, very, very useful for low frequency boosting. Fantastic. Let's move right along here to the custom EQ. And the custom EQ is here, this guy right here. Here's the custom EQ. It kind of looks like a Summit, if anyone knows the Summit stuff. So the custom EQ series is not actually a replica of anything. It's sort of a Frankenstein where I guess Stephen Slate and his crew sat down and said, what if we could make an EQ where you had the high shelf from this, and then the bells from this, and the low shelf from this, and let's make this crazy custom EQ. And so I guess they say that the high frequencies from a tube mastering EQ, well, there aren't a ton of those really. But one of them might be a Manley Massive Passive. And then the low frequency is from a vintage solid state mastering EQ. My guess is it's a Sontec. I don't know. And the mids are from wherever they're from. So they made sort of a Frankenstein here. And it's a very, very cool EQ. I think it has the shortest decay in the harmonics, so the tightest harmonics, and it's got the probably least harmonic distortion. So it's on the tight, clean side. It's got a very focused sound. However, it has fixed frequency selection, which you know, is cool, but it sort of limits a little bit of your sound sculpting when you're working. I mean, nothing. The fact that they took the Neve and made it continuously variable makes me, and hold your ears, Universal Audio people. But sometimes I will use that over. I'll use both. Maybe I'll use the sort of the amplifier modeling from the UAD. But if I really want to carve out an EQ, there's something super cool about having things being continuously variable. That's why I love the Harrison in the UAD line, because you can really get in there and they're overlapping. So I love the sound of this EQ. I would still call it sort of a specialty item because of the fixed frequencies and there's not a ton of choices. It has almost sort of like a home stereo vibe to it, or like a mastering vibe, where you can do sort of these general things, but it certainly can't do very, very specific work, although it does what it does very, very well. So let's go over, actually, come back here. Let's go over here, and here is a loop with the custom EQ on, and it sounds like this. So, it has a very, very, very nice sound. But as you can see here, not a ton of choices. So, like I said, it does sort of this mastering overall thing, a little bit of this home stereo thing. So, let's go ahead and just EQ it together. We can sort of watch the sound come together. This won't take long. You can really sort of do some sort of like generalized things in generalized neighborhoods, and it has a very, very cool sound. So it's almost like if you have something that you like the sound of, you just want to enhance it a little bit. This works very, very well. And on a simpler note, from the same series is a more even simplified thing called the lift. And this lift is very much like your home stereo, but it works extremely well. My guess is that they're either custom made shelving sort of shapes, or they're very, very wide bells. They're one of the two. They don't really say in the manual. They don't want to give away all their little secrets, but this has a very, very cool sound. So here is a lift, the sound of the lift. And essentially, with this thing, you have sort of two choices here. It's all additive. There's nothing reductive here, so it's just an additive thing. You have present or silky. Okay, present probably just the curve sits down a little bit lower. So it gives you more mid-range. That's what we usually call presence. Silky probably gives you some more ultra high frequencies. And then we have big and punchy. Big is probably a modified shelf that trims down some of those really subby things that we talked about before. Punchy is probably more of a focused bell. This is a fun, quick, cool tool. So I think the charm of this thing is that it sounds really really good, and it's very quick and easy to use. You may find yourself using the lift more than you use the full EQ, because as I said, the full EQ has a great sound, not very flexible. This kind of does what that does best in a two knob package, which is I guess why they made it. But I'm a big fan of this thing just for the sound and the simplicity of the use. So there's a little walk through the additive EQ modules that are totally just flavorful and lots of personality, and each one sort of is a superhero in its own thing. One is whatever Marvel Comics, but they all have these special abilities. Once you know what they are, and you start to know how to use them, they work incredibly well. So, all right. I know there's questions popping up. We'll get to them, I promise. Let's move on from additive EQ to musical compression. So we'll go here to these congas. I said I'd throw in a couple organic instruments. And so here is the FG116, the FET compressor. And FET is a non-tube circuitry sort of design topology, if you're feeling fancy. But it sort of has a tube behavior, personality, and sound. It's sort of Solid State's best impression of a tube performance. And this is a replica of the 1176, probably one of the most famous workhorse compressors out there. And the reason people love the 1176 is that a couple reasons. One, it can have a very fast attack. So if you need to do compression on something that's very dynamic and lots of fast transients, this thing can absolutely track that. LA2A cannot do that, right? That's not what it does. But this thing can be quick. That's the one thing people love, that it has a very fast attack. Second thing that they love is you can do a ton of gain reduction on this thing and it still sounds good. And you can abuse an 1176 in a way that you cannot really abuse LA2A and get away with it. I mean, of course, people do everything. But this thing is classic for absolutely pinning the gain reduction and getting away with it and leveling stuff out. And ironically, it has this weird thing where even though it's doing a ton of gain reduction and things are leveled out, it's still incredibly percussive. And it's really sort of one of the very few compressors that can say that. It works on everything, but I don't put it on low frequency stuff. I don't use it for kicks and basses and sub basses and stuff. I use it for mid-range and high frequency elements. Great on vocals, snares, guitars, synths, stuff like that. So here we go to the Slate 1176 replica. And here is a conga track. And it sounds like this with the 1176. Now watch the gain reduction meter and watch how much gain reduction I'm doing. Okay, so the character of this of this compressor is that it's clean and it's fast. It can be a little noisy. Here's the noise reduction switch where you can turn the noise on and off. It's pretty subtle, actually. And these things were notoriously noisy. And anybody who knows the UAD line, there's three of them. The first one is the Rev A, which is really noisy. And then everyone was like, this is too noisy. And then they made the LN, the low noise one. And then people were like, too dark. It's like, what is it? The Three Bears, Goldilocks and Three Bears, too hot, too cold, just right. And then they made the anniversary edition, which actually is very neutral. So this one is black, so you could sort of guess it was the anniversary edition. It could be the LN one. It's not as noisy as the Rev A, but the Rev A is good. Put that on a lead vocal on a pop track, you're halfway home. All right, so let's engineer this together a little bit, this conga thing. But you'll notice you can do a ton of gain reduction and it still sounds good. That's really the hallmark of this compressor. And that it's clean and clear and bright and sharp. Right? I mean, super easy to use. Attack is the higher number's fastest, the lower number's slower. So I'm kind of trying to put the crush on this thing. Fast attack, slow release. That's a recipe for a lot of compression. Very high ratio. There's no threshold. The input is the threshold. And you see I'm doing what? I don't know, 10 dB of gain reduction or something crazy. Still sounds good, right? So this thing is the workhorse where you can really compress things like crazy and they still sound good. Very good for pokey things, percussive things. All right, let's go to another pokey thing, another little organic element, but you could put this in a new disco track for sure. Here's a guitar, and guitars in 1176. That's also, super classic. They go together. So this thing with 1176 sounds like this. Right, so that could be your Nile Rodgers, Daft Punk, Pharrell guitar right there, right? Just holds it in one place, and you notice I'm doing a ton of gain reduction. Lots of input, which is the threshold. Lots of output, which is making up for your gain. There is no auto gain on old vintage gear. You are your own auto gain person. You have to do it yourself, which is fine. I'm going for the super fast attack. the pretty slow release and not as high a ratio as I did on the congas, but still 12-to-1 ratio. And there's a wet dry mix, so you can do like parallel stuff, which is cool too. Probably especially cool on a vocal. So there you go, 1176. You can pin it and it still sounds good. And somehow it still sounds percussive. It doesn't, it's non-linear. I guess what it is the high frequencies, the air doesn't get compressed like other compressors do, where all of a sudden you feel like you compress it a lot and the air goes away. It compresses it a lot in a non-linear way, and it keeps the air, which is a little bit the noise too. Okay, so there you go. Now let's move on to another musical compressor, and this is this guy. And I had a hard time figuring out what this was modeled after. They try to give it away in a cheeky kind of way. This gain reduction meter looks kind of EMI Chandlery. Then it also kind of was a little Neve, but then the red thing kind of made it like a Focusrite or something. I don't know. It's sort of a model of something that never, I think, actually really existed. And I think it's sort of a combination of things. Okay, so it's not a literal classic replica. It's inspired by the EMI console at Abbey Road and this Chandler EMI series that kind of had this design. And it's VCA based, not FET based. Different kind of circuitry, different kind of behavior. Tends to have a very smooth compression. This box is very harmonically rich. And if the 1176 is sort of like the skinny guy, this guy's like the fat guy. This guy has more rich, rounder sound. I think if the 1176 is sharp, this one is round. It's very, very flexible. It has a longer, sort of more ringing harmonic decay to it, just like the Neve. And this also can go transformer in and transformer out. And so transformer, when you see transformer, think fat, right? Transformers is this part of the circuitry that takes a lot of energy and sort of manages it like a traffic station. And in so doing, it concentrates it. It actually adds a layer of compression itself, and it adds a fatness. Anybody who knows like fancy stereos, there's transformerless stuff, there's transformers. Transformer means fat. Transformerless usually means clean and clear. So here they give you the option, which is really cool. Some stuff's going to sound better with the transformer in. Some stuff's going to sound better with it out. And it also gives you these cool two circuits. One is a little bit of a slower low frequency response. So it's a thickener, and one's a little tighter. They both work really good. I love this compressor. It's amazing. And it sounds especially good in the upper ratios for whatever reason to me. Once you get above 3 for something, it locks in, it shows itself. It really, the personality comes out. I'm a super big fan of this. So here is a bass line. And yes, so here's this, and make sure that this is this, which it is, I think. Okay, so here is a bass line with this, I'm going to call it the VCA compressor. FG401 doesn't mean much to me, but the VCA compressor sounds like this. I love this thing. Fantastic. And I know there's a little latency and stuff, so everyone hang in there. But could people maybe feel when I clicked into this ratio how the whole sound just kind of locked into place when I got to 3? Try it at home. I mean, some of these things are Apple loops on purpose so people can just download the demo and try this stuff out. But man, this thing is so cool on low frequency stuff. It's good on everything, but it does shine on the low frequencies. So let's take one more look here at here's sort of a sub bass. And let's just extend this loop a little bit. Okay, good. And this sounds like this on the sub bass. Just fantastic. Love this thing. And here we're using the Circuitry 2, which just has a longer low frequency sustain in a really, really cool way. So, and again, you see me locked into these higher ratios, 4:1 being sort of a very, very typical bass ratios. Let me see if I can make my way through some of these here. Okay, so let's see. Can you use these compressors and EQs on your buses or individual tracks? This is a very good question. It's funny. I'm not doing as much busing as I used to. I used to have a drum bus, a bass bus, an instrument bus, and a vocal bus. And the problem with busing, for anyone who knows, is that what happens is you kind of have to either leave the bus fader at 0 or have duplicate reverb return tracks. Otherwise, if you turn the fader up and down, the change is not reflected in the reverbs. Kind of can drive you nuts. So I'm doing more individually processing. I will do stuff like create an aux and send drums to it at different send levels, and then over compress that bus and blend it in like New York style parallel compression. But the answer is these things work great on buses. I'm just encouraging people these days to, do the bus work if it makes sense, but don't do it just to do it, and don't do it, I think, religiously. I think do it selectively. And like I said, I've been trending a little bit away from lots of busing. Why? Because maybe I'm a control freak and I like to set every little individual thing. But I'll say this. When, my favorite style of mastering is stem mastering. I love stems. I much prefer, as a mastering engineer, to get stems than to get a stereo mix. And when I have stems, if you think about it, that's where my sort of bus processing comes in. I'll take the stem and I'll EQ it, saturate it, compress it, de-ess it, sidechain it, whatever. And that's where I get a little bussy, at the end. And I find that works really, really well. Good question. But yes, they work absolutely good on buses. Next question. What do you think of the Music Radar review complaining of lack of low pass filter for split level routing, gain structure for leveling? Are they being difficult? Our community of mixing and mastering people is the most difficult community I've ever seen. I've seen some of the scariest, trolliest YouTube comments in the world. People are not even nice to each other. This is music. I don't know what's happening. That's so funny. Are they being difficult? I would say, if all of a sudden you're mixing and you stop mixing because of that, you should keep mixing and find workarounds. All these things, everything has limitations. There's not a piece of gear that doesn't have limitations, and you can work in a serial manner and slap a a Pro Q2 in front or after something, or slap anything in front of or after something, and you can even make sandwiches. I mean, that's you'll see, Ozone 7 left out, or Ozone 6 left out reverb for mastering. They were like, well, we decided that's not important. We don't want to do that anymore. But for me, a little bit of reverb in mastering can be magic, especially if people underachieve the reverb. So what do? You take you take an Ozone 7, and then you use the modules you want, and then you put an Ozone 5 reverb next, and then you put another Ozone 7 to finish it up, and there you go. You got your reverb back. So if anyone, yes, they're being difficult. That's my answer. Yes, they are being difficult. Good questions. Other questions. Let me see if I can make my way. Keep feeding me questions. This one from Chip. What's up, Chip? Okay. So you knew this question was going to happen, right? How do you compare this stuff to UAD? Do you like one company stuff more? I will say this, and we just had our UAD webinar series, and it's also going to be at the school, and you can watch it as an offline course, in the bath with your iPad. So it's coming this week, I think. And it was really fun. I love UAD and I love Slate. And I love both of them because they care about stuff that I care about, which is bringing this analog love into this modern digital world. And so they do it differently. I think Lord knows that the UAD stuff is expensive. It's very expensive. It's worth it. It's top class, and I use it all day long. However, I was very, very warmed to see how hard the Slate guys are working, how good the quality, that they're also a little traditional and they're a little iconoclastic too. They're not scared to follow the rules and break the rules. I like that style, and the sound quality is excellent. And they did a few things that I love, right? Like on my Neve 1073, I have frequency choices, but on my Slate, I can get anywhere I want. And I got to tell you, when I'm doing additive EQ, I like to get anywhere I want. So when I'm recording, I'll use the UAD 1073 on a vocal and it's insane. But if I'm mixing, sometimes if I want that Neve sound, but I know I have to get in there and do something very specific, I'll go to the Slate. And that VCA compressor, you saw what that is. That's a beast, right? And there's nothing exactly like that in the UAD world. And then the 1176s, you have more choices of flavor in the UAD world. So I think you mix and match. And the SSL, come on. I mean, that is just brilliant in the Slate, and it has a real SSL sound. They nailed the sound, so and it's very DSP efficient. And with this new rental policy where you can pay $20 a month and have everything that they have, I mean, I just think that that's brilliant. I think it's generous, I think it's smart business, but I think it's cool. I think it's cool that they did it, and so I use both. That's not a political answer. That's a real answer. There's stuff, that VCA compressor, that SSL, and that Neve module that we showed today. It's quick and fast and has lots of flavor, very accurate. Sounds great. So I use both. It's not, that one is, there's not a win or loser thing, but I do have to say I take my hat off to the Slate guys for just providing such a cost-effective way of having all this amazing stuff. So there you go. Other questions? All right, hold on. There was one from Chip. Let's see. That was from Chip. Okay. Gianfranco, what do you think? Okay, that was from, yes, Timothy in Sweden. What's up? Can you use these on the buses? Yes. Francesco. What's up, Francesco? Okay. Uh, yeah, this is and he's a teacher at the school, so uh, and I agree with him. I think just like Isotope and FabFilter complement each other, UAD and Slate do as well. Not one or the other, having both, and I think that's perfectly said. Um, other questions? Anybody? Anything? Anybody? Don't be shy. This is your chance. No pressure. It was just so clear that there are no questions. Let's see. Um, there was a question. What does the filter gray knob do from Wayne? Let's see. Where are we now? The filter gray knob. Was it here on the Neve? Was that a Neve question? There's a drive function where you can oversaturate or drive the saturation. The 1073 on the UAD has that as well, and you can just go for more coloration. This gray knob is the shelf, right? Our fixed shelf at 12K. I'm not sure exactly which gray knob it was. Maybe this is the one because I think that's the only gray knob in the business. Yes. Okay, let's see. Is there other questions? On the Slate SSL. Oh, on the Slate SSL. Okay. So let's go to the SSL. Here we are, SSL and SSL. This knob is a low cut. That's what it's gray and black. And again, don't feel scared to do a little bit of filtering or a little bit of reductive EQ while you're doing your additive. This move right here was a big part of making this kick drum sound really, really good, which was minus a lot, 9 dB at 500. Try this. I mean, this is just this almost always works. Pulling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dB out of a kick drum, around 500. It can be 400, 300, 600, 700, whatever it is. And it actually can be, it cleans it up in a really wonderful way. And this works on any EQ. So even though I say in our system we use this for additive EQ and boosting, we really do tend to, if I'm going through and my hand's right here and I know I have enough bands to boost, I will do a little cut, a little filter. Absolutely. No need to be scared of that. Okay. One more question? Two more questions? Anybody? Can I talk a little bit about combining the Neve and SSL EQs? I like it, David. Do me one favor, just before we go, because I kind of enjoy this. Everybody, just in the questioned window, put your city and the time of day. I always get a kick out of this. It's cool. Please do. I know we got lots of people all over the world. Just take 1 second. I know you're saturated with information. That's a little mixing and mastering humor. But go ahead and put that in the chat if you could. The time of day for you and in the city you're in. I like to see it. Talk about combining the Neve and SSL EQs. Absolutely. The channel strip that we use as a basis at the school is we start with tape compression. We pretend it's the 70s, we kind of skip the 80s, no offense, or the 90s, and we have a tape machine. And that everything gets recorded to the tape machine, and that it was played by people But Dr. Dre used to take his drum machine and slam the tape and then take it off the tape and put it back into Pro Tools for the sound of tape. And so now, basically we'll start with tape, and then we'll do a serial musical compression, 1176s, LE2As, VCA, and we'll just take a little bit of energy off the sound, a little saturation, a little compacting of the sound. So tape compression and then musical compression, and then usually a little reductive EQ. I love FabFilter because I can see everything. Alloy 2 also works very, very well. And then we will tend to do some technical compression. Pro C2, I can't find anything that beats that. A little de-essing if it needs it. And then a little additive EQ, which we saw today. A little Neve, little SSL, little Harrison, little Pultec, whatever you like in there. And then maybe a little limiting, maybe. And then your sound is ready for modulating effects and to send into the reverb. So that's sort of our chain. Now, can you do serial additive EQ? Oh yeah, for sure. Right? And that's sort of what, this was intended to be. This is Steven Slate. He was like, I want to have, I've seen mixers where they take just do the high end on one EQ, the mid-range on another EQ, and the low end on another EQ. What if I put that into one module? So this is sort of David's, answering David's question. This is sort of what this is intended to be. And, let's say you love the high shelf on the Neve. It just opens up the world of air to you. But then you want a tightness of the SSL low end. So you could do several modules using just those bands on that module that you liked. And if you're doing that, you're fancy, and I respect that. I mean, that's good thinking. That's not just, that's having a purpose and, being thoughtful about your engineering. So if you're doing that, you're very advanced. You're in that connoisseur realm, and that's super cool. That's a good way to think. Question. Which additive EQ is more an all-rounder for EDM? UAD Harrison or Slate SSL? Woo! Okay, you got me. Man, UAD Harrison, right? This is what we're talking about here, is this thing. Come here, Harrison. Okay, so this thing. At the school, we love this. This, people overlook this because it looks like it is not fancy. But this is the Michael Jackson console. This is Thriller and all this Michael Jackson stuff. And this has a tight sound, very flexible, super overlapping, no fixed frequencies, a smooth, warm, tight sound. And this thing can do incredible amounts of brightening without sounding harsh at all. It doesn't really ring like some of the other vintage EQs, which can be a good thing, right? Sometimes I feel like running stuff through the Neves is like going through a guitar amp in a good way. But this thing is so tight, so smooth, still warm. I think they're cousins, different design. They're both good. I couldn't live without them. I'm not trying to be Switzerland here. I hope no one's from Switzerland. I mean, I hope someone is from Switzerland. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, I'm not trying to be neutral here, just to be political. I love them both. The low end on the SSL has some extra oomph in the harmonics that I think we saw today. Maybe more oomph than the Harrison in the lows. But in the mids and the highs, the Harrison has a little tighter, cleaner sound that makes you able to boost a little bit more without having any sort of undesirable artifacts. So they're different, but they're kind of cousinish. Um, you know, I mean, look at all the stuff that's mixed on the Harrison. Look at all the stuff that's mixed on the SSL. It's a very good question, but you're zeroing in that they are somewhat related. Um, they're both really good, and they're both have that tight harmonic. It's not that long, ringing harmonic, which can be nice. Good question. Other questions? Anyone? Jump in. These are good questions. Another question. Have you used the VCC in addition to the tape machine musical? Yes, I have, and I'm gonna keep everyone in suspense around the VCC and my best practices there. You'll have to come to the next webinar. So I'm not discussing that today, but I will. I think one of the things that everyone should be doing if you're not doing it, and when people meet with me one on one at the school, also with the core courses, you get a free private one on one with me every week, and we go over your stuff. If people are not doing enough tape, I send them straight to the tape machine. And as soon as they come back from that, they usually feel that it changed their life just using tape. So we'll get into the console emulation for sure. I think a more dramatic effect for all of your producing is that if you're not doing a lot of tape on almost everything or everything, you're missing out. And of course, you have to learn how to set it right, how to not distort it or distort it just the right amount that you want to. But if you're doing tape compression on almost everything, it gets you halfway home. And it's something you want to do right away in the mix, because then you get to see what else you need to do, not as an afterthought. So the Virtual Console collection is amazing, but I think the first place that everyone should go is to the virtual tape machines, because that is a very dramatic turning point in your productions when you start learning how to really use the tape aggressively and ubiquitously. Last question for today from Max. Have you tried the propeller head Reason emulation of the SSL console? What's your opinion on it? I like it. Sometimes mix instead of... Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm a super duper Reason head. I started out as a producer, and I did a lot of productions, and I had a wonderful run with it. And then the universe started telling me to engineer more. And then the universe started telling me to engineer and teach more. So that's where I am now, trying to listen to the universe. But in my production days, I love Reason, man. I would go nuts with that thing. And I think what I would recommend with Reason is to use it as like an incredible virtual studio, but not to mix in it. I don't think that mixing in Reason is going to do justice to all of your time, money, energy investment. I think Reason is something you want to compose in, and actually kind of compose in, and while you're composing, be like, I know I could make the sound better, but let me just make sure I get the bass line I love, the chords I love, the arrangement I love, tempo I love, all that stuff, and then let me trick it out in a program that's really like a hardcore power user mixing program. And, don't get mad at me, Abletonians. But everyone knows I've done quite a few interventions on you Ableton users, because I love Ableton. Ableton is magic for production. And yes, you can mix in it and you can master in it, and there's big songs on it. But I think when I encourage people who compose in Ableton and produce in Ableton to finish in Logic or finish in Cubase, they're much happier, because these programs are sort of built for power mixing with really accurate plug-in delay compensation, and they can take lots and lots of third-party plugins, which is what we're talking about today, third-party plugins. These microbreweries of EQ, compression, and reverb. So at our school, most of the time people are finishing in Logic or they're finishing in Cubase. I think Studio One is actually really good for finishing. And I think, I tend to see, Ableton and Reason as these incredible production composition tools, but more challenging in a way to do the finishing work on. I think, different tools for different things. DAWs certainly should never become elevated to like a religious status. So, and I like people to get fluent in a number of DAWs and use each one for what it's really, really good at. Okay, on that note, it's 3:30. So awesome that everyone came, everyone stayed the whole time. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it inspired you, and I hope it cleared up a couple things of what these tools are and what they really shine on and how to use them. And sort of the workflows are endless. And, whatever you can think, try out and sort of intellectually piece together and then try out and see it work. It's really an exciting way to think about stuff and to do this in a thoughtful way. But this is really, fun. And these EQs and compressors give a personality and a sonic density and a richness and a character that the pure digital ones just can't and never will do. So it's fun to embrace them, learn them, play with them. They really do give back. All right, so everyone have a wonderful Sunday. Please sign up for Sound Toys next weekend if you enjoy learning in this way. If you want to take some core courses in January, tighten up your game. The next 97 minutes, you can save $500. Go to the website, sign up. We'd love to have you. But really, mostly, let's just keep it going. Thanks for coming out today. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Cheers, everyone.